Good evening. Well, it's very hot out. It was 97 degrees. I did manage to get into the pool for a little bit, and that felt good. Walking was a little dangerous, so here I am sitting and talking. There are a couple of stories today that interest me. One is, of course, the shooting in New York, and the other is the most recent news involving the Epstein matter. Let me start with what happened in New York. And to give you a frame of reference, this is where I start. You know my view about Sir Thomas More's conversation with his son-in-law, in which his son-in-law says he would tear down every law, basically, to get at the devil and to save Sir Thomas More from what's happening with Henry VIII and the oath that he wants him to take in violation of Sir Thomas More's religion. But after the son-in-law says these things, he says, I know you, and you're just the one who would do that. You would take down every law, and these are man's laws, not God's laws. And could you stand in the wind that would blow? The wind that would blow. And that's what I'm getting at today. I've mentioned it before, but this is how I see a manifestation of it. When you can no longer trust the Injustice Department to do justice because it's changed hands and has become a political organ, and you see that more and more judges at the appellate or Supreme Court level will do what their leader wants them to do. How did it go? Caesar erat imperator. Trump erat imperator, meaning Trump sees himself as an imperial leader, sees himself as a dictator. And so increasingly, what I see in conversations and the feedback I get from doing things like this is that people don't trust the system, one as much, some at all, and don't expect it to get better. Can we stand in the wind that would blow? And the answer is, what happens when you can't go to a court and at least accede to its practices, and you accede because you believe you're going to get a fair shot at it, up or down. You're going to get a trial. You're going to get a hearing. It's going to be based on the law and the old standards of how you handle a certain case will be the right one. So today there's a shooting in New York. It's a terrible shooting. Now, the sympathy for the victims is quite understandable. But let me tell you what I think we're seeing in this action by a fella who traveled from Nevada, drove all the way to New York. And this was his form of protest. His protest involves CTE, which is chronic traumatic encephalopathy. And we know this because he wrote it in a suicide note that was in his back pocket. And this is an ailment that is linked to head trauma. And some of you may have seen that the NFL and others talk about what they're doing about it. Shane Devin Tamura, who was 27, he did not buy it. And he was a very successful high school player and well considered. And he thinks the problems he has are not being addressed. And so he sees and invites the sympathy for the victims of CTE who claim to care about CTE. And so his experience in high school football is what he believes caused his problems. Now, the NFL offices are at 345 Park Avenue in Midtown Manhattan, 51st if I remember. And that's where the shooting took place. And by now you probably heard of the shooting. It's a big news story. Now, one of the things that Shane mentions is that there was an NFL player, Terry Long, who drank a gallon of antifreeze to kill himself in 2005, and that's because of the CTE he suffered. He put an end to it. Now, after the killings occurred, which I think were to get attention to this cause that we can't otherwise get in the courts, that no one is paying attention. At least that was his perception. And I'm not arguing that this is what we should do. I'm arguing this is what happens when you have to stand in the wind that blows in the absence of laws that you trust and defer in process when you have a claim. So he killed these others, and then he shot himself in the chest. That's relevant because he said he shot himself in the chest because he wanted people to study his brain. He wrote, "You can't go against the NFL. They'll squash you." So that's one example. Now, you might, people talk about mental health and why did he do it, and if he didn't get a gun and all these other things. I understand all of that. But, and I don't know that we have enough of these incidents to call it a phenomenon of the chaos created by Trump. But we have a pattern here. In the case of United Healthcare CEO Brian Thompson, he was killed, if you remember, by Luigi Mangione, also in Midtown Manhattan. And that was December 2024. And he said that he had negative opinions of the United States health industry and that claims were denied that should have been granted. And the court system wasn't redressing this problem. And on the casings of the bullets, he had inscribed before the shooting on different casings 3 words: delay, deny, depose. So if there's any doubt that he's talking about how do we get this to court, that's what was going on. The notion is these parasites had it coming. Now, symbolically, in the case of Shane, because they're talking about the NFL, and one NFL employee was in fact shot, and I think he survived, but I don't know at this stage. The United States has the most expensive healthcare in the world, and we're still ranked 42nd in the world. Isn't that amazing? Now, let me offer an anecdote that I think describes what's going on here. And again, two incidents do not an incontestable argument make, but these incidents have a similar play out. Someone screaming to pay attention to my problem. Can't go to court, don't go to court. And they signal that this is an act of protest against a situation that's not being addressed in the legislatures, not being addressed in the courts, not being addressed by way of practice. Now, my brother, when he died years ago, I remembered that he enjoyed this game, SimCity. It's still around, I believe. It's probably gotten more complicated. And I had no interest in that. I don't have any special interest in games, although game theory interests me a lot. And so I got SimCity. And then I saw some interesting things that my brother, who was a coder and very good at it and very smart, I always thought he was smarter than myself because I thought he got things faster than I did. The difference, though, was what I didn't know, I had developed ways to learn. And I don't think he ever got that part, or maybe he never needed to. So I got this program, and then when I got bored with it for the few occasions I used it, I discovered, well, if you put an airport in the middle of the city, guess what happens? Pretty soon there are fires in SimCity. Can we stand in the wind that blows? That's the message. Now, a second argument, which has been growing day by day, and it's growing at such a rate and in such an undeniable path of bad practices revealed by Trump and others that I don't know that we can ever turn back the clock on this thing. And so let me tell you what I'm talking about. Epstein has been our focal point because it's hard to contemplate that anyone would do this to children, make them objects of sex involuntarily, mislead them as to what they're doing by Maxwell, who was the alter ego, Epstein, who participated in some of these sex sessions that she helped arrange for Epstein. And today, we found what I suspected was true, and it was admitted by Trump. What happened to Trump and Epstein? Did they really break up? Well, it's not clear to me that that timeline is true. That is to say, whatever year he's saying, I think he's trying to push it back, and we'll find out in the days ahead what the real timeline is. But there is a teenage employee who's at Mar-a-Lago. Her name was Virginia Giuffre. I don't know if that's how you say her last name, Giuffre. Her dad worked in the maintenance department at Mar-a-Lago. He got her a summer job there. She was a locker room attendant. Maxwell got to talk to her, talked about whether she wanted to be a traveling masseuse. She was 16 at the time. That's the employee, it appears, that Epstein stole from Mar-a-Lago, took away from Trump. There's more to be told, I'm sure, but not by Virginia, because Virginia has committed suicide in the last several months. We can question her suicide. I don't know what autopsies were done and so forth, but she seemed to be driven to help others who were victims of these sex attacks on women, on this predatory behavior by men of an age, experience, visibility, and supposed integrity that you would think this could never happen, but it has. And so what we ask is, we have to know what really went on here. Did our president care so much that Giuffre was taken from Mar-a-Lago for reasons other than he was just rating his employees? The two of them were close, very close. That is to say, Epstein and Trump. And of course, Trump, who's disloyal upon choices he makes for bizarre choices he has in mind. In this case, maybe this was getting a little too close to home. And there's this old story that guilt spills itself for fear of being spilt. I believe that's Macbeth. That you can't contain it. And Trump, when he's truthful, and the only time that he's truthful is when he's admitting something against interest. I don't think he realizes it. 97.3% of the time he's just lying about everything, harmless things. Or he's making gestures of things he might do to distract us from what else he's doing wrong. So we have two trends today. One is a trend in which I argue that we're going to see alternatives to our failed criminal justice and civil justice system, our legislatures, and so forth, if we don't stop what we're doing and leaving them destructive. The second thing is we have an entire department that no longer can say it's law enforcement, no longer can say it's a justice department. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is really a way for Trump to get even with different people. But I think he's painted himself into a corner finally, and the question is, will he get out of this one? Will the walls close in on him or not? Will the ceiling and the floor close in on him? Will he have night jags like Nixon did when it closed in on him? Will we finally see Trump decline and evaporate and have to deal with the aftermath? What do we do with him before the next presidential election? How do we govern? And I think all those answers are necessary. We might not have had these killings if we didn't mess with our courts and the system that we guaranteed to our citizens represented justice. We would not have this shameful play in public of people so close to attacking and using children for their sexual amusement. It's intolerable. So anyhow, those are a couple of thoughts I have and how I see them from where I sit. One of the keys that we have to keep in mind is when elected officials or commentators say things like, well, in this situation, we would do this or that. There are no situations. Because a situation that depends on, say, the injustice department doing something, and then they don't do it, they don't care about conflict, they don't care about preparing, they only care about the outcome. So the ends justify the means, and the means are anything they want to do and not the process by which they're supposed to operate. So they're entirely unreliable. And so we should not be surprised when there are these extraordinary circumstances that seem to defy our normal practices, and we want to say, what, there's a mental bad health epidemic? No, that's not what it is. What it is people are at wit's end and they can't get a hearing. It's that basic. So maybe tomorrow it'll be a little cooler and I'll be outside. Thanks for joining me. I look forward to talking to you tomorrow. Bye-bye.